Hello and welcome to Sailor Stadium tonight. This is the CatchMark SportsNet team joined by Tom Kendra from MUS, Scott DeCamp and Brent Raeth, and I'm your host Zach Zweigle for the evening. Tonight we are covering the Muskegon versus Mona Shores football game. Both teams are 5-1 going in, and it should be one heck of a match. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about the team's overall records and their conference matchups so far. Brent, would you like to start it off in regard to their overall records? They're both 5-1 records.
Yeah, both teams are 5-1. Both losses have come to some pretty good talent. Detroit King and Cass Tech, both really excellent programs, and both happened within the first couple games of the season. In conference, they're both undefeated. Common opponents were Union and Zeeland West, and Muskegon did struggle a little bit against a good Zeeland West team. While Mona Shores kind of won big 47-12. So really kind of a similar start, I think, to the first half of the year for both of these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I just think it's, just a great local rivalry. It's so good for the Muskegon area to have two teams like this going at it every year. And I just want to say right away, it is a rivalry. There's been a lot of funny stuff going around with especially from the Muskegon side saying, it's not really a rivalry, but some of those people, I'd like to put them on a lie detector test and ask them, okay, is this game just the same as the Holland game to you? And they say yes, and then they get buzzed or something. They know what's going on. You can feel it, and I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great game.
Absolutely. Another point that I'd like to bring up is not only is it going to be a good game, but this is probably going to decide the conference champion, or there's a good chance that it will. So let alone a victory, a rivalry victory in itself. We're dealing with a conference title, or a conference title could be on the line tonight as well.
Yeah, there's a lot at stake. I mean, conference title, playoff positioning, and like Tom said, it's a rivalry. I can guarantee you that whoever the losing side is, it's going to ruin their weekend.
That's right.
They're not going to want to. It's not the same as losing to maybe even like a Zeeland West. As good as Zeeland West is, losing to your team across town there, that doesn't sit well.
No, a loss here sticks with you for 364 days. So yeah, both of these teams want this in the worst way.
Yep, I totally agree. Moving on a little bit to the overall matchup between these teams, Muskegon leads the series 32-8. Obviously, in the last decade, we've seen a little bit of a shift in balancing out which school has taken the victory. What are your thoughts on tonight, and what are some of the key components that need to take place for each team to come out with a win?
Well, I would say, Muskegon's pitched three straight shutouts.
Heads up.
I think
we're in the line of fire here, guys.
The key to the game is Cody.
The key to the game is not getting nailed in the back of the head
and knocked out. So
that's right.
I think defense is going to be the key tonight. Honestly, I think that whichever team can get that stop is going to be probably the one that wins. My gut would be that it's going to kind of come down to the wire. I would have to give the edge defensively probably to Muskegon, just overall, looking at the games they have played and how they've played them. But Shores is going to be tough to stop on the offensive side too, so it should be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. Tom, what are your thoughts on the matchup tonight and their historical records against each other?
Well, obviously, historically, Muskegon has dominated 32-8 overall in that department. And even in recent years, they've won 5 of the last 6 matchups, yep. Even though it doesn't really seem that way. I mean, because Mona Shores has had the better postseason success, back-to-back state titles, so it seems like they've actually done better. But really, in just this rivalry, Muskegon's been dominant even in recent years. What really intrigues me the most is the matchup between Mona Shores offense, which has been so explosive all year. Mark Konechny runs the show. They can run, they can pass, against the Muskegon defense. Yep. And, Shane Fairfield in his 12th year at Muskegon, he's a defensive genius. That's all there is to it. The last time these two teams played right here, it was kind of similar, if you recall, to what Mona Shores is this year. They came in with 1 loss, and Mona Shores was rolling. They were averaged 44 points in their previous 3 games going into that game. And what happened? Muskegon shut them out 53-0. And, you go back a little further. John Chilito at Zeeland West, he's been there 17 years. He's only been shut out 1 time in 17 years. Who shut him out? with Shane Fairfield and Muskegon back in the D3 semifinals at Greenville High School. But the guy knows defense, and I think Muskegon is determined to try to shut down Mona Shores. When Mona Shores has the ball, I think it's going to be must-watch entertainment.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down who can make the other one-dimensional. Yeah. Like, Mona Shores tries to mix it up a little bit, and like with Konechny, as you mentioned, they try to strike a good balance. They're still a run-heavy team. They still want to keep it on the ground. That's including Konechny, who's a big boy at 6 foot, 200 pounds, so he can bring a little force behind his running game too. But he throws a really nice ball, and actually there's been some opportunities where he's had some deep balls for his receivers, and they just haven't held on. So otherwise they'd be putting up even more points. But Muskegon, like you said, they really hang their hat on defense, and man, I almost got nailed by that.
Okay, this is getting scary.
I have never seen Billy Man before in my life.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's who can basically impose their will, and Tom and I talked about the battle up front on the offense.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it ultimately it's going to come down to each other's secondaries. I mean, being able to pass the ball a little bit. Muskegon hasn't passed a ton so far this year, and I think that if they can complete some of those passes and break down Sailor secondary, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge for both sides, and the same situation applies. We've talked about how good Muskegon's defense has been for so long. Breaking down their secondary and getting some serious yardage that's not on the ground. We know both teams can run, so expanding their offenses that way, I think, will be the key tonight for sure. Can we talk a little bit about the coaches' history with each other? Obviously, we know that Matt Koziak and Shane Fairfield both coached under Anise at some point. Do they see eye to eye now? Obviously, we see a little bit of a difference when it comes to their view on the rivalry, or lack thereof, as some might say. What are your thoughts on that situation?
I can't say that they see eye to eye. I'll just leave it at that.
Sure.
Yes, they coached together under Tony Anise, and actually Matt Koziak coached for 1 year as a head coach at Muskegon after Tony left, and then Shane took it over at that point, and he's been there ever since. And so that's the thing. There's that Tony and East coaching tree out there. So it's those two guys along with several others in the area, and they do a lot of the same things. Like if you saw our hype video this week, the end of it shows them doing the two claps. They have a lot of the things that they do similarly. Yeah. And obviously, Koziak came back to his alma mater, got things rolling, but Muskegon's had it rolling for over 100 years. Right. So it's an interesting dynamic, and even though the series is lopsided, it's still one of those things because of proximity, because they're both statewide powerhouses now. Yeah. They don't, it's a rivalry, and it's an interesting dynamic because I don't think there is a ton of probably love lost between the coaches.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
Oh, I would definitely agree. There's not love lost there, but here's how I would answer that, Zach. I think both schools have the perfect person in place to be their head coach. Totally different personalities and styles. Yeah. Really the main thing that jumps out at me is Matt Koziak was more of an offensive guy. He was the offensive coordinator at Muskegon Heights. He was on the phones with Tony Anise a lot when Tony was coaching at Muskegon. So his emphasis is on the offensive side of the ball. Shane Fairfield is an old school defensive guy. He was the defensive coordinator under Tony Anise at Muskegon, and moving up to the head coaching job. So again, I keep coming back to that same point that obviously every side of the ball is important, but when Mona Shores has the ball, I want to see what Shane Fairfield tries to do. I have a feeling he's going to be real aggressive, on the edges, get up right in their face, press coverage, and I think in order to beat that, Mona Shores and Mark Konechny, they're going to have to hit a few deep passes and back off Muskegon, because otherwise, they're just going to stay right in their face all night long. So, the coaching matchup is just one of the many very interesting things going into this game.
For sure. Any thoughts on that, Brent?
I think that I was doing a little reading before in preparation, and there were some articles, Scott, you might have written one of them actually, talking to Shane Fairfield about, when Matt did leave Muskegon, I mean, he was very interested in being a head coach, and there's a couple comments on that in the article, like, if there's a head coaching availability here, I want it, kind of thing. So I think that's interesting. It always makes for a better rivalry. If they're buddies, it's it doesn't make good TV, right?
It's kind of like the Brooks Koepka, Bryson
Yeah,
DeChambeau thing when they were fighting. It's not as fun when they're getting along in the Ryder Cup, right?
That's right.
It's okay they win a Ryder Cup, but now get back to it. Right?
Go back to being rivals again.
I would say Shores struggle a little bit, in their first big game against a big team, and Dante Moore completed 13 of 19 passes for 300 yards against them in that Week 2 matchup, and so I think Muskegon could throw the ball on them, and I'm like you said, secondary could be an issue on the Shore side, so we'll see again.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of moving on to, that's a good leeway into some of the key players that we're going to have tonight. Now, I don't want to say they don't have a star player or somebody that kind of stands out. Obviously, Konecny's huge, and Miles Walton for Muskegon's huge as well. But from what I've read and what I've seen so far this year, they don't have a Cam Martinez. They don't have a Brady Rose, which is different than what we've been used to the last few years. And with that being said, who do you think needs to stand out tonight? Who do you think needs to make big plays for each side to kind of propel them to victory?
I think it's going to start in the running game. Yes, you need to loosen the defense by passing the ball, getting backing that defense off a little bit. But it's all going to come down the running game. On the Mona Shore side, you got Elijah Johnson, senior, who started last year for them in their second straight state title. You got Demir Farnham. He's a junior, he's about 200 pounds. He's pretty well put together. Those are kind of the primary guys. And then they've got, at the receiver spot, they've got guys like Dimitri Roberson, Jalen Vinton, etc. And then on the Muskegon side, they kind of do it by committee as well. They've got sophomore Jacob Price, who's just electric, explosive kid. He's had some big games already as a sophomore, and that's the thing about Muskegon. They're really young. They start, I want to say, 6 sophomores and/or freshmen.
Wow.
So they're bringing a young team into this game and have played, and they're developing throughout the season. But those are some of the guys. Miles Walton, it all starts with him, the quarterback for Muskegon. He's considered more of a runner than he is a passer, but they're trying to kind of feature him in the passing game a little more. So
sure.
You've got Destin Piggy, another young guy from Muskegon who's got he could take it the distance anytime. So I mean, there's plenty of playmakers, even though there's not that Cameron Martinez or Brady Rose guy.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. For sure.
Scott, I think it's funny when you talking about Walton, and he does probably have some growing up to do, but he's got 400 passing yards and 7 passing TDs this year, so he's pretty dangerous.
Fall true tonight to come out with a win. Maybe a highlight or a downfall so far this season for each team. Is there anything that sticks out to you? Maybe it's how close of a score the Muskegon-Zeeland game was, or how Shores struggled with Union. Maybe it's one of those situations. But any highlights or downfalls on the season so far?
I would say both of these. I was a little bit like Tom earlier today when I was kind of taking notes. I initially had Mona Shores, and then I just started reading about the Big Reds a little bit more. And it's tough to bet against tradition. So I'm going to say Muskegon 21, Mona Shores 14.
I like it. Scott?
Well, I mean, my pick is already out there. I put myself out there every week. You guys just get to pick. To pick the pretty helmets. I got to actually put a score out there. I went 27-26 Mona Shores in overtime.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, real cop out, right?
Yeah.
But honestly, and I know you could say this is kind of a duh statement. It could go either way, but I mean, in these kind of games, there's always something that happens that you're not expecting.
Right.
And that's true. And when you have these big game atmospheres, I wonder how each side will handle the big game atmosphere. They played big opponents in fairly big atmospheres, but they haven't played like in this.
Yeah, right.
Something that's been brewing all week.
It's another level.
And they didn't have this last year. A lot of these kids that played last year, they didn't have a crowd like this.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing I want to see is who reacts to that adversity early. Like if they fall behind or whatever, that's going to go a long way in determining it, I think.
Yeah, who can step up and take the W. In this game, I'm going to have